All right, dads. Bushcraft YouTube loves batoning wood. But honestly, if you're out with your kids processing all of your firewood with a knife, you absolutely packed the wrong tools. Durable dads, brothers from other mothers, and sisters from different misters, thanks for tuning in. Today we're keeping this one practical. No survival fantasy, no gatekeeping, no one true way. Just a realistic look at batoning wood, what it's good for, where it actually works, and whether this is something real outdoor dads should actually care about. Because, like a lot of outdoor skills, there's the internet version, and then there's real life. All right, kids, so for today's little experiment, let's pretend we showed up overnighting with just day pack, knife, tarp, cooking gear, minimal setup, no axe, no hatchet, no giant tote full of camp gear. Now, all of a sudden, batoning starts making a lot more sense. Because this technique really shines when weight matters, space matters, and your knife is doing multiple jobs. And honestly, that's probably where this skill belongs most. Now, if you've never seen batoning before, the idea is pretty simple. You're using a stick, your baton, to drive your knife through wood in order to split it down, usually for kindling, stove wood, feather sticks, or to get at the dry inner wood when conditions are pretty wet. And to be fair, it does work. That's important. And you know what? This isn't me dunking on the technique. This is just about understanding where it actually fits. What you see before me is the batoning, essentially. Now, stick, not sourced locally. However, this is a mighty nice baton, about the right size. Let's get at it, shall we? All right. So, the technique's relatively simple. The idea is like that. And you're going to want smaller pieces here, because I am not a pro at this. So we're going to do that, set it up kind of like that. And there we go. Now this is pretty small stuff that you're going to have, and you're going to want that. The smaller, the better, especially for a BioLite or any kind of stove that you're going to fold, like a folding camp stove. Because remember, this isn't all that, you don't have a ton of room. And this is ideal and dry. So I'm giving myself the absolute best out of this. Whoops. So the technique absolutely works. It's just, shall we say, going to maybe take a while. But let's concentrate on some bigger pieces, shall we? Sweet. Look at that. Good way to shape wood too. And it's also good for kindling. This is pretty nice, previously found wood. Now, if you're camping, you're going to probably have already processed your wood or gotten some, or be prepared to make some of your own. Anyways, this is the basic technique. Works good. Watch out for knots. Again, The knife doesn't have to be special, preferably not. And maybe the bigger pieces, the better, but you know what? We're going to want a couple of feather sticks for this too. And the smaller kindling to get it going. All right. Now, little observation. The slower you go and the more deliberate action that you have, the better off everything's going to turn out. Because you can kind of position your knife as you go along. Anyways, bigger is better, but you get the idea. Anyways, rocks don't burn. I'll give you some ambiance. That's enough to get at least things started. But you know what? If you're cooking a meal and you got your mess kit with you, you're going to want probably all of this, and in pieces that you can easily break in half. Okay, I opted for a cheaper knife that I can beat on. So, and more length, just simply because I can maybe process some bigger size chunks this way. So, and more surface area for actually batoning. Also would like to recommend that you find a nice flat area for doing it. So what, field notes? Guess this is number 5. So we'll start with 5.1. First thing, batoning works way better with smaller wood than some videos online might lead you to believe. Once you start processing bigger chunks, things slow down pretty quick. 5.2. Now, if I was generally overnighting with just the day pack setup I showed you earlier, absolutely I would be using this technique. Minimal weight, minimal tools, minimal space. This makes total sense for that application. 5.3. Another thing I noticed, batoning's actually pretty handy for getting at the dry inner wood fast when things are damp. That part is genuinely useful, especially around here during fall's Canadian spring. 5.4. What I would not want to do is process an entire evening's worth of family campfire wood like this. Buddy, that sounds miserable. Because once kids enter the equation, everything changes. Now you're balancing time, warmth, attention spans, snacks, and chaos. At that point, bring the right tools. 5.5. That said, I actually think this is a great skill to teach kids. It's slower paced, controlled, and teaches wood grain, splitting, patience, and tool respect. So even if this never becomes your primary firewood strategy, there's still real value in learning it. So 5.6. The trade-off here is time for weight and space. Batoning is a lot slower, not only in rendering, but in hunting around for a suitable piece of wood that doesn't require a lot of work to get it up to speed for a baton, like right size, low or no branches. And remember folks, you're going to be using that exact same knife you whittled with for eating with later. For this video, the baton I used was a total found piece from another shoot, but it had a lot of love put into getting it useful. Also, if I'm coming clean, I used a hatchet for that. All right, I've got this thing preloaded with a bunch of birch paper, some witch's hair, and, you know, a couple of the smaller pieces. Just to make sure it's going, I opted not to have the feather sticks simply because I have combustible material all over the place and with me. And it always makes sense just to have a little bag of this with you, just in case you're out in the bush and you're having trouble getting things started. You can have your flint and steel and or ferro rod kit. I brought a barbecue lighter because I want this to happen, and it's a little bit cooler day, and by damn, I want a friggin' cup of coffee. Let's get this going, shall we? And once this is rolling, I will go and start fixing myself coffee. Okay, coffee is on. Have a little pile. I just wait for it to boil. And boil for about, I don't know, a good 8 minutes. Maybe a little bit less, because I like my coffee really strong. So we're waiting for the good stuff. And while we're waiting, had I thought about it, I should be out there doing what those guys are doing. So here's the real takeaway from this one. Batoning isn't fake. It isn't useless. And honestly, it's a solid technique to know. But like most outdoor skills, context really matters. Minimal overnight setup? Oh, absolutely. Family campsite with kids? Probably not how I'm processing wood. And honestly, that's kind of the whole point. Outdoor reality isn't about doing things the hardest or coolest way possible. It's about understanding what works, when it works, and why. And that is probably the most durable skill anyway. All right, kids, if this one gave you something to think about, or maybe saved your knife from an identity crisis, hit like, subscribe, and stick around. Because around here, we're less interested in outdoor hype and more interested in what actually works in real life. And as always, here's me keeping the coffee hot and the firewood slightly overthought. Peace out, Scout. Arr.